Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Grayzone. A lot to talk about today. Here with Aaron Mate, a redeemed man. Aaron, welcome to the show. How's it going?
I'm well. Good to see everybody here. Thanks for bearing with us as we're a little bit late, but a lot to cover. A lot to cover today, including my apparent redemption.
Yeah. We'll get right into it, but yeah, we're going to cover Venezuela, a huge scandal out of Ukraine that U.S. media doesn't really seem that interested in, even though this is like pivotal. We will cover the scandal that's rocking Israel and revealing the true face of Israeli society once again. The right-wing crack up over Israel and Epstein, and whatever else comes from that. We might have a special guest. We'll see. But yeah, Aaron, just to start out, there's been some drama, or we should say sort of like past historical drama that has resolved itself. About, was it 5 years ago, Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks gave you the finger on air, really lost it, and accused you of being a Russian asset because of your views on Syria. I'm not going to play that clip. Haven't really had time to search for it. But the clip of her apologizing, or her tweet, has really gone viral and been received pretty well. We might as well get that on screen. This is something you don't see a lot in media these days, where somebody smears you in the past and then they actually come around and apologize for what they said.
And you want to zoom in so we can see it.
Yeah. 5 years ago, I accused Aaron Mate of unfounded claims that he was being paid by Russia.
It was unfounded because it was a lie.
She also didn't accuse you of unfounded claims. She accused you of being paid by Russia.
Exactly.
While I stupidly and sincerely believed it at the time, no evidence has materialized to prove it. So
because it was a lie. Yes.
So, that's good. So, the 5-year window of having evidence materialize has expired. I'm embarrassed by it, and I owe him, along with his readers, a long overdue apology. So, Aaron, you responded and said, "Hey, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the speaking out you've done for Palestine. I, in turn, am sorry for any ad hominem comments I made in response back then. Not how I want to conduct myself." Very gracious response by you, albeit a little on the Canadian side. And and everybody's it's all over there. But I think there's a lot more to say about this. And Anna explained her apology in interview with Tucker Carlson. I'll play that on like accelerated speed. Again, this is something you don't see very often in U.S. media, where somebody smears somebody and then they actually acknowledge they were wrong. If that happened, I would be fielding these apologies.
It'd be your full-time job. You'd have to
there'd be like a line of people at my funeral just like lining up to give like eulogies to me, but about how right I was. But anyway,
the only way to stop that is by controlling our own behavior and by being honest about it. And as I was thinking about this, I saw that you apologized to someone publicly for something that you had said about him. And I just, it was weird that we were having the same thoughts at the same time. But can you explain that?
Sure. So about 5 years ago,
Max, I can't hear you. I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, StreamYard sucks. I'm sorry, but they've added all these new features, and because I left the screen, it stopped my audio. But we're gonna try replaying that.
Same thoughts at the same time, but can you explain that?
Sure. So about 5 years ago, Aaron Mate, who is a journalist and is actually doing a lot of really great work, especially in his coverage of what's happening in Gaza, had reported some things that I disagreed with in regard to what was happening in Syria, right? So he didn't deny that Bashar al-Assad had in some instances used chemical weapons, but there was one particular instance that he was denying, and I disagreed with him on that. Who's right, who's wrong, that doesn't even matter at this point. I don't even know why I allowed that one minor disagreement to basically whip me up into this crazy frenzy and this
Been there, baby.
Right?
Yes.
Where all of a sudden I'm like, no, Aaron Mate definitely, he's getting funded by the Russians. Definitely funded by the Russians. And so on TYT one day, Cenk and I were discussing Syria, and I just blurted that out. And, you know, I was in a different headspace at that time. I'd like to think that I've matured a little bit since then. And I just kept doubling down. I wouldn't apologize. There were some circumstantial things that I would point to, but really nothing solid to prove that Aaron Mate is funded by the Russians. And so over the last year in particular, I just kept seeing his posts on X. I actually was on a panel with him on Piers Morgan's show, and he and I were very much on the same page in regard to the topic we were discussing. And every single time he would come up in my mind, I've just felt really bad about myself because I smeared him and I never apologized, and that's not okay. And so I came across another one of his posts today that I liked on X. And I was like, you know what? Now is the time. It's been 5 years. It's embarrassing that it's been 5 years. Now is the time for me to practice what I preach, to lead by example and apologize to him unequivocally. And I was met with grace. He was very, very kind, and he accepted my apology, and I'm very grateful for that. But there's another point I want to just quickly make about this. If you are in the media, understand, like, we are all flawed, and you're right, Tucker, we all do change, some for the better, some for the worse. It is okay to admit when you're wrong. It is okay to apologize. It doesn't make you, I don't know, a less credible person if you admit you were wrong. And so just something to keep in mind if you happen to be in the media and you've made a mistake, or you've accidentally smeared someone, or you intentionally smeared someone and then realized it was wrong, just apologize and move on.
I just think
Okay, so Aaron, what's your reaction to that?
Well, like I said on Twitter, I appreciate the apology. I do, and it sounds sincere. And I'm glad she cleared that up. Now, I do have to make a factual correction. I do actually deny all the allegations against Assad of chemical. I do. If you look at all the major cases, there's been 3. Ghouta 2013, Khan Sheikhoun 2017, Duma 2018. Duma is the one with the OPCW whistleblowers. All of them, I don't think Assad did it. I think the evidence is overwhelming that these were false flags, and these were deceptions pushed by the Western intelligence community. I just think that's absolutely overwhelming, and there's so much evidence to support that, which, you know, we've talked about extensively, and I've written a lot about. In fact, the Grayzone recently had an article about Samantha Power receiving intelligence coming from the Israelis, them really pushing this, which speaks to the forces that were behind all these allegations. So
Great piece by Wyatt Reed.
Yeah. So anyway, look, just as a factual matter, it's not just Duma that I was talking about, although Duma was where I really got involved, because that's a story with the OPCW leaks where whistleblowers challenged the cover-up of their own investigation. But anyway, so that's just a factual matter. And I have to point out, she talks there about some circumstantial things. Like, I don't know what she's referring to, but again, like, you know, circumstantial can mean something tangible or something baseless. So who knows? It's an ambiguous word. But I mean, look, it's true. I did speak at the UN a few times at the invitation of Russia. That's what you can point to if you want to tie me to Russia. I spoke at the UN Security Council.
But she's going,
Yeah.
you know, she went further than that, and it was not like, oh, you know, whatever. He was, you know, his colleague worked for RT or something like that. It was that you were like actually someone who should have been criminally investigated, and they were doing that at the time, and whatever. Now it's all been cleared up. I think there are some larger points to make here.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's, you know, like, the individual apology isn't as important as I think like the broader lessons. And that is, like, why was it so difficult to be on the left and in independent media and challenge the CIA? And why, when when we would do that
during the first Trump term.
Yeah, and why would we do that when we didn't go along with Russiagate, when we challenged the Syria dirty war, were we, vilified by some people? And I just think, to me, that speaks to the power of our propaganda system. It enlists people, whether they realize it or not, in buying into narratives that are just wrong, and leads people and incentivizes people to vilify those who are challenging their narratives. And that's a problem on the left. It just is. I mean, the Young Turks were not alone in smearing us and in parroting CIA propaganda. That's a widespread problem. But I at least appreciate that this is a rare case where someone's actually apologized for buying into some of that stuff and taking part in that behavior. So, like I said, I genuinely appreciate the apology. And I do appreciate the stances that she's taken against Zionists and all the heat that she's taken. And perhaps herself being smeared by Zionists and seeing the sort of propaganda tricks that are used there, the consequences you get when you speak out against a dominant narrative. Perhaps that's what led her also to reflect on, her own role in doing that against me. I don't know, but it's not just a matter. It's not just a personal matter at all. This is a broader problem in leftist media that that we've been dealing with for a very long time.
Yeah, for sure. It feels like we've passed through this cavalry, this great struggle to tell the truth, and now it's kind of just it's so widely accepted. People on the right are like saying what we said 7 years ago. On a personal note, though, and I know you agree with me on this, Anna's apology is a great first step. You're probably easier to apologize to than Jimmy Dore just because of your chill personality, but she should apologize to Jimmy Dore for trying to destroy his life. And I don't know, maybe apologize to the random, possibly non-existent homeless guy too, in a bid to make the lives of homeless people worse. But
that's where I don't want to get into all that again, because like I spent a lot of time defending Jimmy Dore when he was attacked by Anna and Cenk, and I don't want to reopen all that. But yes, I do. I agree on that front that there was claims made about Jimmy Dore that if you looked at what was available in evidence, and we weren't there, we weren't in the newsroom when they worked together, just weren't supported by facts, and the Jimmy was treated unfairly because he defended me. So yes, I agree with you. I hope both Cenk and Anna consider their comments towards Jimmy Dore, and yes, I do think he's owed an apology as well.
But on the larger point, we were calling out Russiagate. I remember when I went on Tucker to his show on Fox News to call out Russiagate as a scam that will blow back on the anti-war left and will pave a path to war. And how many attacks I got from the left for that. The attacks we got from the supposed left on Syria, on the regime change, dirty war in Syria, was out of control. It was actually, I felt like I was more under attack than I currently feel from Zionists. And it was always that we were some kind of foreign agents. That was where they went, because nothing could be discussed on the merits, and no one knew as much as us. Like they knew none of these whatever they were, liberals or Trotskyists, they couldn't actually debate Duma and the facts on the ground. They couldn't debate what was actually happening in Syria. But they attacked us mercilessly on that. They attacked us on China. They were all, it was the left, right, and center were pushing the Uyghur genocide narrative in order to ramp up the new Cold War with China, which would lead to a new hot war. They were just relentless in their echoing of CIA propaganda. And, it feels like an entirely different era. It was the first Trump term when the CIA and the FBI were the allies of the resistance, and they all went along with it. Sam Cedar and the Majority Report went along with it. It wasn't just TYT Jacobin was pushing for regime change in Syria. They were calling for, they actually published a call to arm the rebels with surface-to-air missiles. I mean, it was crazy. It was a crazy time. Then Trump is defeated, or he loses somehow during the COVID era, which no one wants to talk about now. No one wants to discuss that with me now from the left. And Biden comes into office, basically a demented Weekend at Bernie's semi-corpse becomes the leader of the Democrats. And all of these left liberal outlets that had attacked us are sort of exposed, and there's no resistance anymore. And they're kind of like walking around aimlessly, like Harold Melvin in the Blue Notes when Teddy Pendergrass left, or like the Doors after Jim Morrison croaked, or like the Grateful Dead without Jerry. They were just kind of like, they have no leader, they have no direction. They had just been like pushing all this deep state propaganda, and now they're just flailing, looking for something. And all of a sudden, like, we get proven right again and again. This, regime change takes place in Syria. Al-Qaeda comes to power. Everything we were predicting, not firing a single shot back as Israel occupies the Golan Heights. 2022, reality crashes through with war in Ukraine. Everything we were predicting there. October 7th, the Gaza genocide. It's just like again and again, everything we've been talking about warning about becomes reality. And Venezuela too. I was relentlessly attacked for interviewing Maduro. I was relentlessly attacked for exposing the violent, bloodthirsty coup against Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. And it was from the left. It was from the like pro-regime change left. Now, no one has anything to say about that, because look at where it's all going. It's going towards a full-scale U.S. military assault on Venezuela. So all of these figures now have to rebrand. And so it's kind of like, first they attack you, then they ignore you, then they rebrand as you, then they apologize to you. I think Mahatma Gandhi said that.
Yeah, well, listen, everything you're speaking to showcases a problem that still exists on the left, because there still is so much incentive to go along with regime change propaganda. It's harder to do it now because Trump is actually bringing so much of this to fruition, for example, by directly threatening regime change in Venezuela. But I hope that this apology that I got, is the start of maybe a broader reflection on that. It's like how easily it is to get duped in regime change propaganda, vilify those who challenge it. So maybe other people will follow suit. And I do think, look, people could have sold out on Palestine, but they didn't. The fact that that is the issue of our time, and that there is sort of like in the same way that Bernie was a unifying force for some people back in 2016, Palestine has been as well. And so in the same way that the same outlets who push pro-genocide propaganda, like the New York Times, people ought to consider and think about, well, okay, if they can see the lies and deceptions that are being pushed around the genocide in Gaza and all the sort of like the Hamas rape hoax, for example, that's a great example of atrocity propaganda where it's very uncomfortable to challenge it. And there's so many incentives to go on along with it, and so many disincentives to challenging it. People can see now widely on the left that was a hoax. So then think about, okay, well, what else are we being lied about? The chemical weapons allegations in Syria, all the propaganda used to justify now regime change in Venezuela. I mean, these are it's all part of the same propaganda system. And I'm just trying to think positively here. Maybe there's people can finally wake up now that it's so stark, and the lines are so clear. But yeah, listen, everything you're saying is, I agree with you. You've been vilified, especially far more than I have, because you put yourself out there even more than I did on all these other issues, like interviewing Maduro. I remember all the heat you took for that, and as if that was like a bad thing, or like an embarrassing thing to interview a vilified foreign leader who was being marked for regime change. And unfortunately, too many progressive outlets have gone along with the regime change propaganda that we're all supposed to be challenging.
Jacobin was pushing that too in 2017, 2018. I mean, that they've changed. Everything's changed. So it's kind of like, do I really want, I don't want to play like ultra politics, ultra left politics, or try to pummel people or institutions that were wrong. I think the important thing is they get it right now, and they understand that, the Gaza genocide, yes, it's the moral test of our time. But once you've passed that test, you have to see the big picture.
Yep.
The same system that's pushing NATO forces onto Russia's borders, encircling China, that toppled the government in Syria, that's pushing war with Iran, is the system that reduced Gaza to rubble. And so you can't disconnect the two. It's the imperial transatlantic system. And so once you see it that way, then that's fine. And all is forgiven. And
even there, but look, even if you don't, adopt our political analysis of the world, right? Which I don't care whether or not someone adopts that or not. What I care about, though, is if you're in journalism, do you care about facts or not? And do you care about having a substantive discussion of the issues? And as you said at the beginning, there was such hostility to having a substantive discussion of the facts. Like the OPCW story, that's a great story. There's leaked documents from the world's top chemical weapons watchdog alleging a cover-up. I'm like, I think they show a cover-up, but at the very minimum, they allege a cover-up. So why was there such disinterest in looking at the facts of that story and having a serious discussion about it? It's because it challenged propaganda that people just weren't ready to challenge, and they didn't want to believe that this narrative that Assad gasses on people could not be true. So in that case, we were either vilified for reporting on it or just widely ignored. Same with the Russian interference. Like, why was it so hard to challenge even that? Such a benign story, relative, because even if it's true, who cares if Russia steals some emails? But yet, if you challenge that one also, that was considered heresy. Why? Because we don't believe that Russia took some emails and gave them to Julian Assange. It just that's the part that I really want to see changed, is this like a hostility to the job of fact gathering. Honestly, because that's what we're all supposed to be in this for, is to gather facts. I mean, if you're not doing that, then there's no point in working in journalism. So that's where I think we should start, and look at all the reporting that Anya did in Venezuela, and how just a lot of people just didn't want to hear that, like the theft of Venezuela's oil company. That's a story that just did not get a lot of play among the U.S. left. And why? I mean, it's like, factually, these are solid stories, and also they're really important. But there's some sort of aversion to that. There's only so far some people are willing to go, and that's a trend that I hope is reversed.
Well, it's been reversed. I don't know if what the left is anymore, but yeah, it's over. I mean, like, I just don't see anything anymore advancing imperial narratives from the progressive grassroots left, and the right's done with it. I just did like an hour-long interview with Alex Jones today, where he just let me completely cut loose on Trump, on all the lies that Trump is pushing on Venezuela, on Iran, on it just laying into Israel. They're still, you can see they're sort of uncomfortable about challenging Zionism itself, but I'm able to get the mic and say whatever I want on these, I guess you could call them America First or MAGA podcasts. They're just done with it. They're done with the kind of conservative incorporated politics. So it's over. Now we're kind of in it doesn't feel right now necessarily like left-right struggle. It just feels like there's these two siloed political movements or constituencies which have cultural differences, who are at war or being crushed by the donor class that controls both parties, which are their only options. And you're going to see more of a civil war play out over Israel-Palestine within the Democratic Party once the presidential primary rolls around and you see how few choices there are now. This is taking place just because Trump is in power, but we're going to cover that a little bit later. I want to get into Venezuela right now because Defense Secretary and Trump administration DUI hire Pete Hegseth has announced Operation Southern Spear, which means the USS Gerald Ford is now in the zone of operation in the Caribbean. This is the largest U.S. aircraft carrier, and it's joining an entire battle fleet with nuclear submarines, destroyers. B-52s are able to launch from Puerto Rico, and there are drills taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. And here's Lindsey Graham attempting to sell the war to the American public. This is basically how the war is being sold to the American public. And I guess I have to zoom in here.
Yes, you do.
I have to zoom in to see it myself. Should I do it in Lindsey Graham's voice? This is Lindsey Graham. Let me have a glass of rosé real quick. That is absolutely zesty. To those who wonder about what's going on in Venezuela, you should understand President Trump is deadly serious about stopping the narco-terrorist state of Venezuela from continuing to poison Americans with illegal drugs. President Trump also believes Maduro is an illegitimate leader. It sounds like one of his staffers wrote this. Is an illegitimate leader whose days are numbered. I agree with President Trump's assessment of the situation in Venezuela. I do not consider Maduro a legitimate leader, but rather a drug trafficker who has been indicted in U.S. courts. Bush 41 took Panamanian leader Noriega down under similar circumstances. There is a drug caliphate in our backyard that includes Venezuela, Colombia, and Cuba. I'm very glad President Trump is dedicated to ending this reign of terror. The sooner Maduro leaves, the better for the people of Venezuela and the United States. That is America first. And according to Reuters Ipsos poll that came out today, 21% of the American public supports Lindsey Graham on a U.S. military intervention in Venezuela. 21%. I didn't know that there were that many gusanos, escualidos, and defense contractors in America. That's a large number. But it's actually a very small minority of Americans who support Lindsey Graham there. And the lie is drugs, the war on drugs. But notice how he slips in the word caliphate, drug caliphate. That's because they're going to try to claim that Venezuela has Hezbollah cells and Iranian support inside its territory and that it actually threatens America when most Americans are done with it. They're not believing the WMD lies. They know that Venezuela poses no threat to the U.S. and this is about oil and contracts and plunder and neocolonialism and crushing independent government that doesn't take marching orders from the U.S. regime. But the lie is cartels, that Nicolas Maduro commands a drug cartel, that he is a narco-terrorist, and that he's using drugs as a form of terror like this. The fentanyl coming into the United States is being sent by Maduro. And he is said to be the head of the Cartel of the Suns. That's the designation that was issued by the Department of Justice under former CIA operative William Barr, who was Attorney General in the first Trump term, to put a bounty over the head of Nicolas Maduro for $15 million. It's now $50 million now, or 25, or I think it's 50.
Yeah, they doubled it.
Yeah. The Cartel of the Suns does not exist. It's such a gigantic lie. Why hasn't there been like any, it doesn't seem like mainstream media, like the Washington Post, New York Times, they don't seem that excited about this war as they have in the past, although they've helped vilify Venezuela and vilify the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela and kind of created momentum for this war. They don't seem that excited about it. But none of them have invested any journalistic energy into exploring the lies that are underpinning this intervention. And the big lie is the cartel of the Suns, which, I mean, we've exposed it before. We've talked about this before, but I just want to just keep highlighting this.
Bring it on screen.
According to what the former head of the Drug Enforcement Administration told Mike Wallace, this drug shipment got here courtesy of what he calls drug trafficking by the CIA in partnership with the Venezuelan National Guard. While rumors of CIA involvement in drug trafficking have circulated for years, no one in the U.S. government has ever before publicly charged the CIA with this kind of wrongdoing. And it's not the kind of accusation anyone in government would make without thinking long and hard.
Let me understand what you're saying. A ton of cocaine was smuggled into the United States of America by the Venezuelan National Guard?
Well,
in cooperation with the CIA?
That's exactly what appears to have happened.
Until last month, Judge Robert Bonner was the head of the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA. And Judge Bonner explained to us that only the head of the DEA is authorized to approve the transportation of any illegal narcotics like cocaine into this country, even if the CIA is bringing it in.
Let me put it this way, Mike. If this has not been approved by DEA or an appropriate law enforcement authority in the United States, then it's illegal. It's called drug trafficking. It's called drug smuggling.
So what you're saying, in effect, is the CIA broke the law. Simple as that.
I don't think there's any other way you can rationalize around it, assuming, as I think we can, that there was some knowledge on the part of CIA, at least some participation in approving or condoning this to be done.
Judge Bonner says he came to that conclusion after a 2-year secret investigation conducted by the DEA's Office of Professional Responsibility in cooperation with the CIA's own Inspector General. And what reason did the CIA have for promoting this drug smuggling?
Well, the only rationale that's ever been offered is that this would lead to some valuable drug intelligence about the Colombian cartels.
Over half of the Colombian drug cartel's cocaine crosses the border with Venezuela on its way to the United States and Europe. Back in the 1980s, the CIA was mandated by then-President Reagan to develop intelligence on the Colombian drug cartels. And so the CIA, with Venezuela's Guardia Nacional, or National Guard, set up an undercover operation, a drug smuggling operation in Venezuela that could handle the transshipment of the Colombian cartel's cocaine on its way to market. The plan was to infiltrate the cartel, and it worked. For the CIA National Guard undercover operation quickly accumulated this cocaine, over 1.5 tons, that was smuggled from Colombia into Venezuela inside these trucks, and then was stored here at the CIA-financed Counter-Narcotics Intelligence Center in Caracas. The center's commander and the CIA's man in Venezuela was National Guard General Ramon Guillén Dávila.
I tried to work together with them.
All right, well, it goes on for a while. Ramon Guillén Dávila, let's go back there real quick. Hold on.
The center's commander.
You see, this is Ramon Guillén Dávila, and he's wearing a patch that has a sun on it on one of his arms. That was the symbol, something that officers in the Venezuelan National Guard wore. This is all before Hugo Chavez. This is before Chavez came into power. This is under the pro-US government before Chavez. This report, I think, is from 1993 by Mike Wallace, when 60 Minutes sometimes reported on the CIA, not on behalf of the CIA. Guillén was the main CIA asset in the Venezuelan National Guard. And they created this cartel in order to ship drugs into the United States, supposedly for intelligence purposes. And they gave the name Cartel of the Suns to this cartel simply because of the patches that these pre-Chavez National Guard members wore. So the whole Cartel of the Suns thing it's something that was created by the CIA to poison America. I mean, where did that 22 tons of cocaine they shipped into the US go? It went up the noses of Americans. And now it's just been rehabilitated in order to target Venezuela so that they could justify potential decapitation strikes against Nicolas Maduro, to just like kill their leaders, pull a Noriega operation. So it's a gigantic lie. It's a WMD level lie that actually, if the US media would tell the truth, would remind Americans how the CIA poisoned our own society in the 80s and 90s.
Well, that's what I wanted to say about this. Is that this does speak to how much sort of contempt the Trump administration people have for the media, or at least how easily they feel that they can dupe the media, because they're so lazy with this propaganda that they're recycling a cartel that the CIA used to work with to now push this regime change campaign against Maduro by falsely claiming he's the head of that cartel. And they can trust that the U.S. media just won't fact check them on it. Like you have, and you even brought up a clip from like the most like reputable journalistic institution there is, 60 Minutes, or at least what it used to be. And yet still this doesn't penetrate, right? A mass audience has not seen this and doesn't know this. There was reporting on the fact that Tulsi Gabbard basically ousted intelligence analysts who contradicted the Trump administration's claims, right? I mean, that's been reported.
Yeah, this is on the other big lie, which is that Maduro controls a criminal gang called Tren de Aragua and has used migrants to invade the United States in order to attack America through a migrant wave. When we all know the migrant waves were created by U.S. sanctions to destroy Venezuela's oil sector, which impoverished the population of Venezuela.
Yeah.
And according to a declassified U.S. intelligence report from this April, Maduro has no control over Tren de Aragua. In fact, he basically neutralized it with his own security forces in Venezuela. So what does Tulsi Gabbard do? She fires the 2 intelligence officers who issued that report in order to keep the lie going, so that Trump can enact the Alien Insurrection Act to carry out mass deportations, but also to justify a military assault on Venezuela that Tulsi Gabbard used to oppose very publicly.
Yeah.
And which made her kind of unique.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact,
wild.
Trump used those credentials that Tulsi Gabbard has for being anti-war, anti-regime change, anti-politicizing intelligence from Iraq to Syria to help get elected. And then how does he repay the favor? He goes and basically presides over a new deception, a new regime change deception, and gets uses the credibility that she had built up among some sectors to push that.
Yeah, and I mean, I should probably do a whole piece about this, but this administration and the people around it, they've been mobbed up with narco governments for years and years. I mean, this is Lindsey Graham with look at Lindsey Graham's face. He's like, look at this little man right here.
Oh, the good old days.
He's surround
Joe Lieberman.
Yeah, it's like the 3-headed hydra of neocons. Joe Mentum, Joe Lieberman, John McCain, and Lindsey Graham. And they're welcoming Alvaro Uribe of Colombia, the Colombian president, to the United States, Mr. Plan Colombia. Alvaro Uribe was basically a drug lord in presidential guise. And the U.S. loved him because he partnered with right-wing paramilitaries to crush the FARC and to crush peasant rebellions and to crush urban leftists. And he was, early on, he was the head of the aviation authority. And as the head of the aviation authority, he was authorizing flights for Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel. His predecessor had been killed for attempting to stop the flights. And then when the, I believe, interior minister came in and attempted to stop the flights, he was killed. Alvaro Uribe somehow survived his tenure as aviation minister. He served 2 terms, and then they brought in Ivan Duque, who is basically Uribe's proxy to serve his 3rd term. And Uribe was mobbed up with all sorts of Colombian gangsters. And it's Duque was very close to Rubio. Uribe is very close to Rubio. They love this guy. He was sort of the linchpin of the American program in Colombia. It's why I think it was Hugo Chavez. He referred to Colombia as the Israel of South America. And I mean, this was actually something that came out in a defense intelligence agency analysis of top drug traffickers in Colombia, that in 1991, Uribe was listed among important Colombian narco traffickers. It just goes on and on. Marco Rubio, he helped prop up Juan Orlando Hernandez from Honduras, who's now in a federal prison for life in Florida for drug trafficking. He was the president of Honduras who led the coup regime after the U.S. Helped stage a military coup against Jose Manuel Zelaya, the rightfully elected president of Honduras, and basically installed a de facto narco dictatorship. Look for all the pictures of Marco Rubio hanging out with Juan Orlando Hernandez, propping him up the same way he props up. Man, my brain just glitched. Well, he props up Daniel Noboa in Ecuador. Yeah. Daniel Noboa, head of the shipping company of Bonita Fruit of Noboa, of the Noboa shipping company. He was head of shipping. There are constant headlines about cocaine being shipped in Bonita banana crates to Europe, to the United States. Most of the cocaine and fentanyl, but mainly cocaine that's coming into the U.S. comes from the Pacific through Ecuador. Ecuador's been overrun by narco cartels. The society's been destabilized. And Rubio's very close to Noboa, who is a Miami-born billionaire. And then you got Bukele in El Salvador, close friends with Rubio. Rubio's tight with Bukele. And a lot of Venezuelan opposition figures who are clamoring for war for a U.S. war on Venezuela, who we exposed, Wyatt Reed and I, in our new investigation about the 2020 mercenary coup in Venezuela. They're advising Bukele. But here's the crazy thing about Bukele. He's been credited as this hero of the drug war who's crushed Mara Salchucha, MS-13 in El Salvador. Okay, do you remember when the Venezuelan migrants, several plane loads, were sent to CICOT, the Supermax torture center in El Salvador, and they were publicly humiliated by Salvadoran riot police on their way into that prison when Venezuela was seeking their repatriations directly to Venezuela? That was part of a deal where basically the Trump administration paid Bukele to take in those Venezuelans to create a sadistic display for the MAGA base. And in exchange, Bukele got MS-13 top figures sent back from the United States where they had been turned into informants that the DEA and the Department of Justice were using to crack down on cartel networks and gangs inside the United States. So Trump threw the Department of Justice under the bus in order to appease Bukele. And why did Bukele want those MS-13 figures to come back to El Salvador? I mean, they were already in U.S. prisons. They were helping U.S. intelligence and law enforcement. Why did he want them? Because he had cut secret deals with them. He was actually colluding with MS-13. This is just a well-established fact. And he wanted to make sure that they would be silenced in his CICOT prison, that no one would ever hear from them again. So he got them back, and they didn't squeal about their partnership with Bukele. It goes on and on. Marco Rubio, we don't call him Narco Rubio for nothing. I mean, this has been, if you follow like even Spanish language corporate media, it's a matter of public record that Marco Rubio was living in the home of his brother-in-law, Orlando Cecilio, the brother of his wife, Barbara Rubio, in Miami when Orlando Cecilio was one of the cocaine cowboys in Miami. He was busted for trafficking in tons of cocaine. He was asked about it on Univision.
Y entonces se entera que Orlando Sicilia, el esposo de su hermana Bárbara, había sido arrestado y acusado de algún delito relacionado con drogas, según usted escribe en el libro. Y luego su cuñado sería condenado a 25 años de prisión. Eso es exactamente lo mismo que nosotros dijimos en Univision. Entiendo que eso le haya molestado a usted y a su...
He's asking Rubio about it while he was a presidential candidate. and saying, you know, this has been, that Univision has already reported on this.
Su familia, lo entiendo perfectamente, pero la pregunta es, como periodistas y los votantes no tienen el derecho de saber qué tipo de relación tenía usted con alguien vinculado al narcotráfico.
Realmente la historia fue...
We have the right, he's saying, like, the voters and journalists have a right to know about someone who is linked to drug traffic, that you're linked to, who is a drug trafficker. And Rubio
sobre
gets
mí,
so
me habían
angry.
contactado a mí primero.
Usted
Pero
tiene 16
trataron
años,
de...
¿no?
Sí, pero
And
déjame...
he's saying you should have talked to me first.
Mira, perdóname, Jorge.
Like he feels like he's being
toda
ambushed.
esta serie de cosas, pero va más allá de eso. Después, en primera plana del noticiero nacional de Univisión, entiendo que usted no estuvo en el aire esa noche, pero en primera plana del noticiero de Univisión nacional pusieron la historia que no se trataba sobre mí, era la historia personal de dos ciudadanos privados que no tienen...
So you can see Rubio's just freaking out about being asked about this. He should be asked about it now that the drug war is front and center. I mean, I can't think of a less credible gang of figures to be waging this war. And look at who's going to come into power. It's going to be a literal corporate whore. I mean, I don't use that term just as a way of denigrating Maria Corina Machado, but because of what she's saying. She's basically declaring before a Miami business conference at the Adam Smith Center for Economic Freedom, which is where Juan Guaido is a professor, that she's going to whore out Venezuela to multinational corporations if she rides to power on the back of a tank.
$1.7 trillion opportunity, not only in oil and gas, which is huge, and you know that the opportunities, because we will open all upstream, middle stream, downstream to all companies, but also in mining, in gold, in infrastructure, power. We have our grid right now has a 17 gigawatt opportunity of energy potential that needs to be rehabbed, certainly for technology and AI.
She looks crazy. She looks like a wild-eyed concierge for everyone who wants to loot Venezuela. And that's what this is about, along with crushing a revolutionary movement that you can call it, you know, people call it socialist. There are definitely strong socialist currents in Chavismo, in the Bolivarian Revolution, for sure. But at its base, it's also just nationalism. It's about a people reclaiming their own resources for their own benefit. And they've been financially assaulted by US sanctions and now the US military for trying to do so. That's what this is about. There are US troops in Trinidad, miles from Venezuela right now. Trinidadian fishermen are hearing drones overhead. I think we're on the eve of war. And you're not hearing enough and seeing enough pushback against this. There aren't protests. There's not much of a public debate. A Senate resolution to denounce US military action inside Venezuela was shot down. 51 Republicans voted against it. That's it.
And now Trump has sent this massive aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, into the region. And look, I'm not sure what is in Trump's head, what he wants to do, but clearly that Lindsey Graham post that you put up before, that's Lindsey Graham's effort to just keep people on board and to try to convince the MAGA base that this is a good thing to go ahead with regime change in Venezuela. And I guess, what was the aim of all this? Like, you know, Trump openly admitting that, yes, I've authorized CIA covert operations. It's not like the New York Times reported that. It's not as if they did this in some like grand scoop. It's because the Trump administration wanted them to report this. So there's a psyop going on here where they're trying to foment destabilization of Venezuela, get the government to collapse from within. That's not happening. So then what is the next step?
I mean, they thought maybe, you know, as the U.S. military did in 1964 with Brazil, that they would spur a kind of right-wing counter-revolution in the streets and a military coup by bringing the military to the shores of Venezuela. That doesn't seem to be working either. And now that's why Lindsey Graham brought up the Noriega option, to actually go in and and kidnap Nicolas Maduro, which would be pretty difficult to do considering the multi-layered defenses of Caracas. I mean, Caracas does have air defenses surrounding it. It does have layers of military defense, as well as the popular mobilization of the colectivos. So unless everybody just folds, I don't think that's going to happen either. And what we would see is a bloodbath. But I don't talk to anyone inside Venezuela or out who doesn't think the U.S. will just walk away without doing something with this massive buildup.
Yeah, exactly. Because if Trump backs down, then he doesn't look like a tough guy, which is all he cares about. By the way, just a technical thing. If you're watching this on YouTube and the screen is off, there are, for some reason, 2 YouTube streams of us right now. So if you go to the other stream that's on our YouTube page, the picture looks fine. Just for some reason.
Yeah, this is a new StreamYard feature that they've introduced where you can stream it vertically and horizontally. And basically they're streaming. They told me to stream it vertically and horizontally because some people watch it vertically on YouTube, but we won't do that again. StreamYard's introducing all these crazy new features that make it harder to use.
Yeah, because all it is basically our faces, but just heavily zoomed in. So I don't know why anybody would want to watch that. So, yeah.
I don't have, I guess I should have worn makeup for that.
Yeah. But anyway,
my face is melting like a candle.
Yeah.
But next week we'll do better. I think let's get into the Ukraine Energy Gate scandal. This is something I think important, and we haven't covered Ukraine in a while.
So basically in Ukraine, Zelensky's facing his biggest corruption scandal to date. His allies at the state-owned nuclear energy company, close allies, someone who basically helped bankroll his whole operation, is accused of operating a kickback scheme for in the energy sector worth more than $100 million in kickbacks. And this comes at a time when Ukrainians, because of increased Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, are having to go more and more without heat and power. And so this isn't, and right as, we're entering into winter. And funnily enough, this was uncovered by this Ukrainian anti-corruption agency that's heavily backed by the West, and that Zelensky tried to shut down this past summer. And when he tried to do that, that also led to the biggest protest that he's faced since taking power. And now these agencies, which are heavily backed by the West, so then you have to wonder is there a Western hand in this coming out? Is there a move being made against Zelensky by some of his supposed allies in the West? I don't know. But this is all coming out now, and it's a major crisis for him, especially as Ukrainians are going without power, and especially as just this growing crisis of desertions and people not wanting to be sent off to die to fight this war that is now almost 4 years old. The anniversary of the Russian invasion is coming up in February.
So the regulatory agencies, which were installed by the West, heavily funded by the EU, as part of the bargain for dumping so much money into one of the most corrupt countries, I think the most corrupt country in Europe. This was sort of the bargain. Oh, we'll give you all this if you let us have these regulatory agencies. Then Zelensky moves to shut them down. NABU and SAPO, right? That was last summer.
Yeah.
When the friction begins, you start to see these kind of color revolution style protests in the streets of Kiev with the technocratic youth who work for the NGOs, the kind of people who came out in the Maidan in 2014, and now they're protesting against Zelensky. They went away. It's war. They're on a war footing. Zelensky can always kind of keep people circling the wagons. Now things are getting really bad. And the figure what is the scandal? The energy companies were getting kickbacks of 15%.
Yep.
In order to sign contracts. And the person presiding over that corruption scheme was known as Zelensky's wallet. What's his name?
His name is Timur Minchik.
Yeah, Minchik. Okay. Yeah. So Timur Minchik was like also the accountant for Igor Kolomoisky, as far as I understand. And he helped set up Zelensky's show, Servant of the People, and a lot of other Zelensky-related entertainment ventures, which made Zelensky a household name. Kolomoisky was kicking in the money, and Michnik was overseeing all of these various companies. So Michnik has this long connection to Zelensky, and now he has fled, and he is now in Israel.
Yes, I was going to say, of all places he fled to Israel, which is just funny. And also,
it's where all the like corrupt oligarchs from Ukraine and Russia go, like Berezovsky, for example.
Yeah.
Because they have a non-extradition policy.
The irony is that it should be Israelis fleeing back to Ukraine and to Russia, because that's actually where they come from. But anyway, that's another story. But yeah, so he fled to Israel, and this is actually a real crisis for Zelensky. And if you're in the West, but he does still, it looks like, have the backing of Europe, of his key European allies
and the U.S.
who are, especially the Europeans who are desperate to keep this show going, this proxy war going. So, for example, Jens Stoltenberg, he's the former head of NATO, and he said that this corruption scandal is basically it's all the more reason to keep funding the Ukraine proxy war.
I know also that President Zelensky really works hard to fight corruption, and we should support him in those efforts. But the right response is not to reduce support to Ukraine. The right response is to continue to provide substantial economic and military support to Ukraine, and then help them in fighting corruption, because it's urgent and it's important for us that Ukraine succeeds in stopping the Russian aggression.
So because they're corrupt, it's urgent we give them more. That makes sense.
Yeah. But the problem they're facing now is, where's the money going to come from? Because the U.S., at least for now, has stopped providing the funding. Trump does not want to go back to Congress and ask for more money. I mean, like, you never know with him. That could be yet another betrayal that he does of his campaign promises. But I think for him, that would be even a stretch, after he kept talking about how we're not going to give Ukraine any more money and we're going to end the war. So where do they find the money from? Well, now their only recourse is to basically steal Russian assets, because there were a lot of Russian assets that were frozen after Russia invaded. But if you do that, then you're basically blowing up the entire credit system of the EU. You're basically saying that, like, you cannot rely on the EU banking system. So internally, there's a lot of division over that. But for proxy warriors who are committed to continuing this war, that's really their only option at this point, because their societies are facing internal decay. Living standards have plummeted. Energy prices are higher. So, like, where's the money going to come from? Welfare has already been cut in some states, and so there's not enough money there to cut. So what do? I mean, their only recourse now is to steal Russian money. And here is the same attitude of basically just complete indifference to Ukrainian lives. It's very much pervasive. This is Kaja Kallas, the top EU diplomat. This is what she said today.
Supporting Ukraine is a bargain compared to the cost of Russia's victory. Wars are lost by whoever runs out of money or soldiers first. Supporting Ukraine.
I mean, how does that even stand to reason? Like, Europe has suffered so much economic damage from this war.
Yeah, and she says, like, wars are won by whoever runs out of money and soldiers first. Well, who is losing more soldiers? It's obviously Ukraine, just based on their sheer size compared to Russia. Russia hasn't had to kidnap people off the streets the way Ukraine has. You can see it in all the videos that come out of Ukraine, because Ukraine just has far less people. Russia is such a massively bigger country, which speaks to why, one of the many reasons why it was such folly to have this whole proxy war to begin with. But the attitude remains: let's just keep sending more Ukrainians off to die and keep coming up with money to keep this thing going. And that seems to be the dominant attitude. And the problem is, even though the Trump administration, people like Trump and JD Vance, who are not ideologically committed to, a proxy war in the way that Biden was, they're still not willing to do what it takes to reach a peace deal with Russia, to actually address Russian grievances that go beyond Ukraine, expansion of NATO, arms control, the so-called missile defense sites that the U.S. has in Poland and Romania. Trump's not going to roll that back. That's not in his wheelhouse to engage in diplomacy like that. The last president willing to do that, you can argue, was Reagan. Like, Reagan was the last president seriously interested in diplomacy with Moscow when they, reached things like the INF Treaty, which Trump then killed. Obama did do New START, and that's a good thing. But aside from that, Obama also did the Maidan coup. Obama also expanded or modernized, quote unquote, the U.S. nuclear arsenal. He also, after initially he said he wasn't going to go ahead with George W. Bush's so-called missile defense sites in Poland and Romania, he did. So what happens in Washington is, no matter what the intention of the president is, they come up against the permanent pro-war bureaucracy, and that's who ultimately calls the shots.
And here's former BlackRock executive and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz explaining how the war is just benefiting Germany, how it's been such a boon for Germany. Actually, this really, if you read into his comments, strongly contradicts Kaja Kallas and also highlights the inhumanity of EU leadership.
Und ich will, damit das Bild vollständig ist, auch hinzufügen,
I have to
ich habe
translate.
heute in einem längeren Telefonat den ukrainischen
Zelensky must make sure Ukrainians serve their country instead of leaving for Germany.
Jeez. Yeah.
He's saying Zelensky has to crack down harder on corruption and keep young Ukrainians from leaving the country. Well, they're not leaving they're leaving the country because they don't want to be sent to the meat grinder. So BlackRock says you have to go to the meat grinder because BlackRock increasingly owns lots of land in Ukraine and wants to buy up more of Ukraine. It wants the spoils of war. They've created they've created an impossible situation for themselves, where they have to shoulder the burden of inevitable migration while keeping the war going. These people are insane. And at the same time, it's Merz who will profit, not the average German, particularly German less skilled laborers who are being pushed out of their jobs in competition with Ukrainians who are willing to work for less, who are working lots of like Uber type jobs in places like Poland. So this war is not economically benefiting Europe in any way. And yet they're asking to dump more money in when the country is in the grips of a massive corruption scandal that isn't being covered in the US. I mean, you have to really look for coverage of this.
It's just, so like, where is all this going? It just means this war continues and Russia is going to take more territory. That's been the trajectory of the war. Russia's gone at a very slow pace. But they're doing that for obvious reasons. Is they're just trying to wait out Ukraine. They have a lot more people. They have a much more efficient military production process than the West does. So they're just going to keep waiting this out and slowly take more territory. And unless there's a change in Washington, that's just how it's going to go. A lot more Ukrainians will be sentenced to death, and Russians too. I mean, I often wonder, like with Putin, like if you were to tell Putin that like nearly 4 years later you'd still be fighting this war and you'd have lost, hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know the exact death toll in Russia. The U.S. estimate is around 1 million. That strikes me as too high, but what do I know? But regardless, it's a lot of people that he sacrificed. Would he have done what he did back then if he knew that this would still be going? I think he expected this to be over a lot quicker than it was. And one of the reasons why it wasn't over so quickly is because the U.S. and the UK sabotaged the diplomacy that Zelensky immediately undertook with Russia. But certainly Putin's not backing down now. He's invested too much in this. And so that's where we're headed. It's just like, so I guess the question is, how far is Russia going to go inside of Ukraine before they can decide that they had taken enough to be able to declare a victory.
And how soon before Zelensky becomes Yair Netanyahu's neighbor in Miami? Because Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev, and former Ukrainian president Petro Poroshenko are now talking about forming a unity government, and many Ukrainians are turning against Zelensky, who is increasingly just propped up by the West.
Well, the irony there is that Klitschko was part of an agreement to have a unity government with Yanukovych back in February 2014. There was a power sharing deal that would have kept Yanukovych in power under reduced authority, have early elections, and Klitschko agreed to that. He was one of the more sort of moderate Maidan leaders. But the hard right element of the Maidan, the ultra-nationalists, the neo-Nazis, the fascists, whatever you want to call them, they sabotaged that. And they did that with U.S. backing, because the U.S. immediately, after blessing this power sharing deal, after the coup happened with, on the strength of the hard right, the ultra-nationalists, the U.S. immediately welcomed the coup and said that this was a great thing. So, it's funny how this, and of course, what was the main impetus, or what was the initial spark for the Maidan, along with Yanukovych along with him delaying signing the EU trade pact, because he didn't actually outright reject it. He just delayed signing because he wanted better terms. It was corruption. People were upset about corruption. And now you have Zelensky, who took power on the strength, or at least, who took power after, was elected in an election that happened after that coup. Now he's facing massive corruption charges. And so it all underscores that all of this could have been avoided had simply the ultranationalists in Ukraine and their Western backers been willing to respect agreements that had already been made, the Minsk Accords, and then the power sharing agreement that would have left Yanukovych in power for just a little bit longer under reduced authorities.
Well, we'll keep following this. I think we should cover another really shining example of the power of democracy promotion in Syria, as the Al-Qaeda leader formerly known as Ahmad Al-Jolani, Abu Muhammad Jolani, is now Ahmad Al-Sharaa and meeting with Donald Trump in the White House and being hosted for friendly interviews on Fox News. Here's a look at, it takes me forever to get things on screen because of the new StreamYard. Here's a look at Ahmad Al-Sharaa's visit to the White House. It was really, here, he's looking Reagan-esque here.
In front of a portrait of Reagan.
In front of a portrait of Reagan in the Temu decorated, gold-plated, Vegas-looking new Oval Office. I'm sure Benjamin Franklin would be proud of this scene. There he is with Trump, the former deputy founder of ISIS, seated next to J.D. Vance in front of Trump. J.D. Vance and Trump Trump was a very staunch critic of the U.S. support for the so-called moderate rebels going back to 2013. But here it's all come full circle. Rubio's there as well. They all look so happy. It's almost like a fever dream, like I'm hallucinating. Like I saw this coming. We both saw this coming. We talked about it we covered it for years. I wrote a book called The Management of Savagery, how the U.S. national security state fueled the rise of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Donald Trump. And now the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria and former deputy founder of ISIS is having a meeting in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. I mean, I can't think of more confirmation of the thesis of my book, for which I was mercilessly attacked again and again. I was just blocked after being booked to do my book launch at the main political bookstore in Washington, D.C., Politics and Prose. They canceled my talk. The windows of their bookstore were smashed for hosting me. And now reality comes crashing through again. The US has been supporting jihadists around the world in order to weaken their geopolitical foes, starting in 1979, at least in Afghanistan. And this is the continuation or the culmination of that program. They toppled an independent government, the last strong or fairly strong independent Arab government, which was not subservient to the IMF and which had alliances with Russia and Iran and countries across the world that were not in line with the US regime, but which had also sought relations with the US, which the US rejected. And they toppled that government and now have a friendly government led by the former leader of Al-Qaeda. And Trump is spraying perfume on that figure in the White House, literally spraying perfume on him. It's iconic. Sorry, I can't get anything on screen because of StreamYard today.
This is men's fragrance. Yeah. This is no. It's the best fragrance. Come here, man. I have more here, sir. Okay. So what we'll do is just take that, Joe, put it in, and then the other one is for your wife. How many ones? You want their wife? You guys, I never know, right? You never know.
أنا أرسلت له هدايا فيها شيء أثري قديم أول أبجدية صارت في لعبة التاريخ، أول ختم أيضا صار في التاريخ، أول نوتة موسيقية. أول تعريف الجمهورية أيضا صارت في العالم. That was made in the world. Very good. هي نسخة عن أشياء أثرية موجودة عندنا.
This is the freedom that Syrians fought for, is to get Trump perfume sprayed on them by the president as they and like, why is he there? He's there because he's coming to Washington to, beg the remaining holdouts in Congress to lift the sanctions that helped destroy Syria and help put him in power. That's really was the main point of his visit, along to, help market him to the U.S. public. But, like, one of my takeaways from your book, The Management of Savagery, is that Trump actually benefits politically from demonizing migrants that are caused by our regime change wars, including in Syria. That does help fuel the rise of sort of chauvinist nationalists like him. And he also, spreads Islamophobia in his public rhetoric. But when you have the literal founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria now being willing to act inside of U.S. control, as opposed to the previous Syrian government, now all of a sudden he's welcomed with a friendly reception in the White House. So it's, Islamophobia is wielded by politicians like Trump to gain power. But when literally an Al-Qaeda leader can serve U.S. interests, he's given a very friendly reception.
And serve Israeli interests.
And serve Israeli interests too, of course, yeah.
I mean, they're clearly angling for Syria to join the Epstein Accords, also known as the Abraham Accords.
Yeah. But even if Syria doesn't formally join, because that just might be too obvious a sellout I mean, even if Syria doesn't even, they've already de facto joined, in the sense that they've weakened the axis that resists Israel. Syria was a critical land bridge for Hezbollah to receive arms from Iran in fighting back against Israel. And that's not happening anymore, obviously. So even if Syria doesn't even formally join the Epstein Accords, you should call it, it doesn't matter, because they're already effectively a de facto member.
The the Pentagon has announced a de facto military base in Damascus, which will clearly be used against Iran and against the popular mobilization units in Iraq, and as a tripwire to trigger war. The Israeli military has advanced to the suburbs of Damascus and has received no resistance. And it looks like Syria's Al-Sharaa is ceding Mount Hermon, the highest point in Syria, which was part of Syria's strategic deterrence against Israel, its strategic depth, to Israel, de facto ceding it to them. But this is why he's welcomed in the White House and being hailed as this great leader. And then they're finally ending the Caesar sanctions, which destroyed the Syrian economy and helped drive one of the largest migration waves since World War II into Europe. I mean, the US didn't really shoulder the burden, so what did they care? But it helped turn Europe right wing. And all the liberal forces in Europe supported that. That was another one of the kind of points I made in the management of savagery is, European liberals shot themselves in the was just muted against my will. I don't know if the Mossad just cut in there on behalf of Al-Sharaa or what, but this is being really glitchy. And the Syrian business class had a big meeting in DC, a really bizarre event. I think this was in DC. And I mean, you can see it's a very similar to the agenda in Venezuela, where there is a class of, you could call them bourgeoisie, who want to benefit from regime change and are seeking contracts. Now that the Caesar sanctions are gone, this is like a class of people, a class element that was ejected from Syria or left when their land was expropriated in order to redistribute land to reduce poverty among rural farmers in Syria by Hafez al-Assad. And this element used the Syrian Muslim Brotherhood kind of as a battering ram, even though most of them were secular, in order to try to destroy the Assad government and the Syrian state from within so they could come back into power and exploit Syria and go back to the old ways, the good old days, when inequality was much more extreme in Syria. And they were willing to destroy the Syrian economy through the Caesar sanctions. And you'll see one of the key figures, architects of the Caesar sanctions, Muaz Mustafa, the guy who brought John McCain on his illegal trip into Syria, jump up with excitement in the middle of this video. It was, by the way, this was tweeted by Charles Lister, who is basically like the DC lobbyist for the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda for several years, and is like, it feels like he's unofficially working for Al-Sharaa. Good evening, Mr. President. Good evening, Tom Barak. We're from the Syrian Jewish community. As Mr. Barak said, from the very beginning of the liberation, we went to the White House, State Department, and Congress. We advocated and told them the sanctions must be lifted. Yay. And there's Muaz Mustafa right there clapping. And he's recruited these few Syrian Jewish figures to kind of like pose for pictures with Al-Sharaa in order to kosher him before the Israel lobby and many of the powerful Zionist forces that surround Donald Trump. At the State Department, they said, who are you to ask for the sanctions to be lifted? I told them, this is for the Syrian people. Okay, so it goes on and on, but
just like the cynicism of Muaz Mustafa applauding a call to lift the sanctions when he was the top lobbyist in Washington for those sanctions and repeatedly denied that they hurt the Syrian people. I mean, we dealt with this for years. Like when we would just point out the like reports coming out from the UN, there was a UN rapporteur on sanctions, Elena Dohan, who I interviewed a few times, just pointing out that like these sanctions were sadistic, that people like Muaz Mustafa are saying, oh, they only target the Assad government, blah, blah, blah. That no, they were devastating ordinary people. Trump officials would brag that they exacerbated food and fuel shortages for everyday Syrians. That's a direct quote from some Trump officials in foreign affairs from a few years ago. So people like Muaz Mustafa would deny that, claim that all this was against the government. As soon as the job is done, the dirty war succeeds, the regime is overthrown. Now all of a sudden the sanctions are horrible, they have to go. And it just speaks to the cynicism of this whole enterprise. And it's why, like, whatever you thought about the Assad government, and I've met so many Syrians who have so many grievances, and it's like, to me, like, that wasn't my business. That's for Syrians to take care of. It wasn't our business to impose. Nobody in Syria voted for the US government, for Joe Biden, Donald Trump, to decide whether or not they can have an economy, whether or not they can afford bread, whether or not they can afford or even have access to fuel. Because one of the things that the U.S. and Israel did is literally they would bomb oil tankers trying to bring oil from Iran to Syria. They would literally bomb them. Israel did that hundreds of times. It's not our business whether or not Syrians can eat, and we have no right to impose these sanctions. Whatever people inside Syria think of their own government, it's completely not our business. And you can see now the job has been achieved. Now all of a sudden we can acknowledge that the sanctions hurt ordinary Syrians, which is the same playbook in Venezuela too. The whole point is to make the people suffer enough so that they turn against their government, which we don't like because they're outside of our control. It's the exact same playbook over and over.
And just one last point about this seemingly bizarre but actually fitting spectacle is the Fox News interview with Ahmad Al-Sharaa. We don't need to play it. He's asked about 9/11 and he said, well, I had nothing to do with it. I was a teenager at the time. I wasn't like one of the dancing Israelis or whatever. I didn't dance there. We don't know his opinion on it. Whatever. This is just like a week after Fox turned the Islamophobia up to 11 over Zohran Mamdani, who was campaigning in like Chelsea in gay clubs. He was like, turn it, let's get turned up for my election in like gay nightclubs. And they're saying he's going to bring jihadism, like Sharia law to New York. It's going to be a communist jihadist takeover. Like the guy drinks with his wife, I'm sure, who's like this bohemian Brooklyn Bushwick Syrian artist. Like he's one of the most secular guys you can imagine. And Fox News was predicting that ISIS would take over New York. And then they welcomed the deputy founder of ISIS into their studio for a friendly interview. It just speaks to how Islamophobia doesn't actually exist in any real solid space. It's completely fungible and something that could be turned on and off to serve imperial imperatives. And that's why that no one has any principles at Fox News at all. No one has any principles around Trump Incorporated. It's all about transactional empire. And I wonder what Zohran Mamdani thinks about this. I think he was accused back in the day of being a chemical attack denier.
Well, all the more reason why I'm thrilled that it's victory, if that's the case, because again, if you look at one of the major deceptions of the Syria dirty war was to accuse Assad of gassing his own people. And, just think of the logic of Assad doing the one thing that he knows would invite U.S. military intervention. Even on its face, it was just such a transparent Iraq WMD level lie. But yet, unlike Iraq WMDs, which has been thoroughly discredited, a lot of people still believe the Assad chemical weapons claims, which is why one of the reasons why I spent a lot of time on that story. But still, we couldn't get people to even look at the OPCW leaks, which documented a cover-up that debunked one of those allegations. But that's an Iraq WD level lie that is still very, very pervasive.
Well, the moderate rebels have arrived. The moderate rebels have come home. I know you have like a hard out.
Yeah.
You have to go, right?
Yes, I do.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Aaron, for joining us at the Grayzone. Great job as always. And congratulations on your redemption.
Thanks. Good to see you, man.
We'll see you back here soon.
See you soon.
All right. Well, the show ain't over yet. We still have a lot to talk about. I wish I had one of those gamer chairs because my neck kind of hurts. I'm like leaning forward. I'm gonna have to get one of those, or you look like like I'm streaming and I'm in a real race car. Everybody has one now. I got to get one. But we still haven't covered the right-wing crack up over Israel. And I know there's a lot to talk about with Epstein. The House Oversight Committee had an Epstein email drop. I honestly, it's like you turn on CNN or MSNBC and they're talking about Epstein all the time. So I don't know how much we can add there, but I don't think they see Epstein in the same way that we do. But to cover this section of our stream, I want to bring in the newest member of the Grayzone, Kay Pritzker. This is his first at bat in his rookie season at the Grayzone in our live stream. Kay, welcome to the Grayzone. How's it going?
Great to be here. It's going all right. I've been watching all night. It's a good show so far.
Great, thanks. Tell us a little about yourself before we get into it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a guy. I was, I'm a journalist. You might know me from Breakthrough News, where I worked for the last 5 years. But I've been very political my whole life. I still am. I really got started with the Palestine movement. I was in SJP in my school, and that's actually around the time I met Max, was during all the serious stuff where Max was right 7 years ago, and people were throwing bricks through windows and stuff. Max's work, Aaron's work, a lot of people have brought me to where I am, and now I'm here. So just glad to be here. And I really admire everything the Grayzone has put out for many years.
Yeah, you're doing incredible work so far, and you did a piece, just kind of like an explainer piece on, well, I think it was our first critical piece on the incoming Mamdani administration, where you explain how Mamdani has kept on the NYPD commissioner, Jessica Tisch. And I looked at some of the comments, people freaking out on you.
Yeah. No, I was kind of shocked at like the level of vitriol. Like, I knew there would be some comments, but it was honestly amazing how angry people were. There was also some support, but it's like, a lot of people were angry at us for like pointing these things out, which is strange, because it's like, shouldn't you be angry at Zoran? Shouldn't you be angry at Zoran for keeping Jessica Tisch on board? But it was interesting. A lot of people were commenting things like, he can't just change out the police commissioner like that. Like, he can't fire her right away. And it's like, well, I think he's actually the only person on the face of the planet that has the ability to change the police commissioner. But, it kind of reminded me of the people who would, the Democrats who early on in the Gaza genocide would defend Biden and they would say, oh, well, he can't do anything about this. And it's like, he's the president of the United States. Like, isn't this the whole point? Didn't we elect Zoran? And, mind you, I want him to succeed. I want him to arrest Netanyahu. I want him to freeze Iran. I think these are great things. But, wasn't this the whole point of his campaign, was to sort of shake things up? And, there were some other people saying, oh, well, he's got to play politics. He's got to, go slowly. And I think it's like, this is kind of a thing people were sort of wary of, is like, that's the point, there are limits to what you can do. Even if you get one guy in there, one solid guy, there's a whole political apparatus surrounding every institution in this country, on a municipal level, on a state level. This is really the nature of U.S. politics, is it's controlled by interests beyond those we can see.
Just really quickly, what's wrong with Jessica Tisch? Who is she?
Yeah, Jessica Tisch she's the police commissioner in the NYPD. So, she's the head, she's the top cop in the largest police department in New York City. It's obviously, it's a police department that's larger than most standing armies. And she, among many things, I mean, there were some things I actually didn't get to introduce in the video, but obviously she's a Zionist. So, that's complaint number one of many people, is that she has a long history of supporting Israel. And even though she tries to sort of conceal her politics as, a cop, she spoke at the ADL's Never Is Now conference, where she was saying, basically anyone that criticizes Israel hates Jews. October 7th and the Palestinian resistance is declaring a war on Jews. She's very tight with Chabad Lubavitch and, a lot of these right-wing, very, ultra critical. I don't know if you want to play the clip. Yeah.
No, I mean, this is just
Yeah. So she's very much a Zionist, and Her family also, she comes from
the Lowe's fortune, right?
Yes, yeah, the Lowe's Corporation, this giant conglomerate, which has netted the family a net worth of $10 billion. So, she's one of these Jewish Zionist elites, or a descendant of one. And, she also has a long history in the NYPD of increasing the sort of surveillance capacity of the NYPD. She was a huge proponent of that. She's been trying to increasingly digitize the NYPD. And, she's also just one of these typical, cops can do no wrong style cops. She actually overturned the NYPD's own review board. They made a decision about this cop in the Bronx who shot and killed someone in broad daylight over a seatbelt infraction. And the NYPD board concluded this guy is guilty. He should lose his job. The family was pressing on the NYPD for years to fire this guy. And then Jessica Tisch comes in and overturns the entire decision in her capacity as police commissioner and says it's because the complaint was beyond, it had happened too far in the past. It exceeded a statute of limitations, which I didn't know there was a statute of limitations on murder, but that's the police commissioner. And this is who, Zoran is saying he wants to keep. And I'll just add one more thing. It's not even like he has to, go out on day one and say, oh, I'm going to, defund the police and there will be armed leftist vigilantes patrolling the streets of New York. I think he could have said something as simple as hey, we're going to look at all of our options. But, I think this is definitely a capitulation. And, some people are trying to dispute that, but that's Jessica Tisch.
Well, you didn't even assert that it was a capitulation. You just raised the question of whether she will be a malign, insidious force within his, obstructing his administration. And then you got attacked. I mean, I heard, I was on George Galloway's show a few weeks ago, and there was this former State Department official who had resigned over Palestine, or the genocide under Biden, very courageous move. But she actually mentioned, I heard her say that people she knows in New York are naming their children Zoran.
That's amazing.
I mean, if it's at that Obama messianic worship level right now, because things have been so bad and you've been living under the Eric Adams, Cuomo, Bloomberg. I mean, I don't know how many horrible mayors and governors they've had in New York, Hochul. Things have been so bleak that finally this seems like an oasis, that you're going to be defensive of this decision. That's a recipe for disaster. By the way, I don't know if he even has the power to arrest Netanyahu.
Yeah.
The U.S. hasn't signed on to the Rome Statute. So I don't know. It would also be a federal arrest, wouldn't it?
That's actually a good question, because the U.S. hasn't ratified the Rome Statute. So I don't know, but I did see Mohammed Al-Kurd had been able to ask him a question, I guess today, and he posted that that he basically said New York City is a city of international law, or we're a city that defends international law, so we will do everything in our power to arrest war criminals or something along those lines. But who knows? I mean, obviously, he will see a lot of pushback from Jessica Tisch if Jessica Tisch would be the arresting officer. I'm not entirely sure where the jurisdiction falls, to be honest. But yeah, it obviously, it's a question. We'll see.
And I think what the phenomenon that fueled Mamdani's rise to power is also present on the right among people under 40 or under 35 who are extremely online and are fed up, maybe for different reasons, over the slavish devotion of Donald Trump for Israel. And I really feel like Donald Trump lost his mystique in July when his administration issued a memo announcing they weren't going to release the Epstein files. And he started to come under attack from his base. Criticism from his base has risen to the point where it is consuming his administration. And you can really see this is like a war between the America First grassroots and all of the tools of the donor class that's pulling Trump's strings. It's not really, I don't really think there are like two grassroots factions. Like Josh Hammer doesn't represent a constituency. He represents Netanyahu. And he's just there in order to discipline the right and discipline that movement, along with Ben Shapiro and Seth Dillon and the Babylon Bee, which is obviously kind of, it's supposed to be the MAGA version of the Onion. But, I exposed Seth Dillon for being present at the Hamptons influencer retreat that Bill Ackman held with Charlie Kirk, which was completely Israel focused. And now look at what the Babylon Bee is doing.
Yeah, it's
well, let me just say, for those of you who aren't looking at your screen, this is a tweet by the Babylon Bee. Megyn Kelly gets rid of old pager just to be safe. And Megyn Kelly, who's sort of like riding the fence between these two factions and trying to stay relevant, even though she has bashed the Palestine solidarity movement, said, WTF Seth Dillon, and called him out. And now Babylon Bee has deleted that post. What you were going to say?
No, I mean, well, yeah, the Babylon Bee thing was crazy. And I saw like people like pro-Israel supporters in the comments saying like, what's the problem? It was a joke. Like, what is the threat here? And it's like, this is, I mean, just the, like pretending like they don't know, playing dumb is just unbelievable. But, no, I was going to say, yeah, I mean, yeah, Trump has completely lost his mystique. I think that's exactly the way to put it. I mean, he rose to power. I mean, he became the phenomenon in American politics that he is, or was at least, on the image that he concocted of, drain the swamp. We're going to go after the deep state. I mean, he more or less introduced this entirely new vocabulary into American politics. And, Jeffrey Epstein, this kind of represents the crux of all of that. I think this was sort of like the last holdout of so many people in the MAGA movement was, well, at least maybe there's this thing. And, I think it kind of, it really touches a point of curiosity, and I think a point of suspicion that all, Americans really have and have been sort of reluctant to talk about until more recently, which is that politics is fundamental. The people in power, we're told they're the most wise, they're the most, it's a meritocracy. They worked for this. They, got into all these good schools, whatever. They know the system and they know how governance works, but it's the complete opposite. It's the people who are rewarded, the people in power, are the most corrupt, the most depraved. In fact, that seems to be how you advance in American politics, is you sell out. You allow yourself to run with these criminals and these criminal enterprises. You allow yourself to be blackmailed in order to be elevated to a higher level of trust in these sort of, God knows how these circles work. But the point is, it's not this system is not a meritocracy. It is exactly what a lot of people feared. And for Donald Trump to then basically spit on his own base and say, you're crazy if you talk about this. This is a Democrat hoax, probably the most offensive thing you could accuse, the MAGA movement of, perpetuating and peddling a Democrat hoax, is just unbelievable. And yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot we could speculate about what this means. And I think we're seem to be learning more every day about.
Well, here's that Trump Truth Social post that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And you're connecting Epstein to the broader crack up on the right over Israel, because Epstein is a catch-all for everything that Donald Trump promised to crack down on, but which has controlled him. He's sort of a symbol of a class of decadent, sexually deviant, perverse, reptilian shapeshifters who exist within the hovercraft 1% elite, hovering from Davos to the next elite perv show on Epstein's Island or wherever they are. They're not on the ground with the people. They exist above the law. And so Epstein takes on a much larger symbolism here. And everybody feels that on the right and the left. It's actually the kiss of death now for a Republican member of the House to try to not sign on to the petition to release the Epstein files that Thomas Massie introduced. So Trump says now that the Democrats are using the Epstein hoax, he's calling it a hoax. Like, this is the language that Donald Trump could. Donald Trump is accustomed to using this language about Russiagate and introducing it through a Twitter post or Truth Social, like Zeus throwing down thunderbolts against his enemies and riling his base. And he's calling it the Epstein hoax, involving Democrats, not Republicans, not me, to deflect from the shutdown. Sorry, that didn't work out for you. And I'm going to ask Pam Bondi and the FBI, Kash Patel, who is filing through his girlfriend, auto-tune country singer Alexis Wilkins, $5 million lawsuits against America First podcasters who mocked her or joked around about her being a Mossad honeypot. Kash Patel to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's involvement with Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, JP Morgan Chase. Great, do it. He says this is another Russia scam. It's all fake. Because obviously Donald Trump shows up in the majority of these House oversight emails. And as Jeffrey Epstein said, Donald Trump is the dog that hasn't barked. It's embarrassing to Donald Trump. It's shown that Donald Trump is part. We always knew this, but his hypnotized MAGA masses of followers, they couldn't see it until now. They see that he was down with Bill Clinton. Him and Bill Clinton were hanging out with Epstein's girls. Yeah, there's one email that says that to Jeffrey Epstein that said, like, what about Donald Trump blowing Bubba, referring to Bill Clinton? And Epstein responds, "Surus," which is like Yiddish. It means like troubles and worries. This is the most pathetic thing I maybe ever seen Donald Trump say.
The Bubba thing, I was like, it's like up there with like the Lindsey Graham ladybug thing. In like, I just don't want to know. But, I mean, Epstein.
Well, remember Epstein had the photo of the painting of Bill Clinton and
I was just about to say, yes.
We're on the same wavelength here.
I mean, it is remarkable. They almost seem to brag about, what they know and like just the flaunting of this, the power. But you mentioned something about Kash Patel, which again, this is another one of those people that was like, we're going to get him. This time we just got to get a second term and we're going to flush we're going to drain the swamp. We're going to flush them all out. And he's completely flipped. You put out an article about his girlfriend and what Elisha Schaefer like sort of joked about his girlfriend being a Mossad agent. I actually don't know enough about this. Can you explain, what's going on here?
Well, everyone it was mostly on the right in the America First grassroots started mocking and alleging that Kash Patel's girlfriend, Alexis Wilkins, who he strangely doesn't live with, was a Mossad honeypot because she produces content for PragerU, including pro-Israel content. PragerU is just like an Israeli propaganda cutout posing as a conservative educational organization. The CEO is Marissa Straight, who is a veteran of Israel's Unit 8200, which is a cyber intelligence division. I don't think there's anything to it, but obviously the relationship is a little bit strange. Especially because he's been living with a male roommate, Mark Muldoon, since 2019, who's like a timeshare scammer in Las Vegas. And I don't know what happened. Alexis Wilkins got really upset about these rumors that wouldn't stop circulating, these unsubstantiated theories. And so Kash Patel activates the chairman of his foundation, Jesse Banal, who is his personal lawyer, to sue Elisha Schaefer for tweeting a photo of Kash and her arm in arm above a post that wasn't about them, that was just about Mossad honeypots in Iran. So it's the first time I've seen a $5 million lawsuit leveled against someone for defamation for simply tweeting a real photo. And they accuse him of insinuating and that he knew exactly what he was doing. No, to get defamation done in the US, you have to prove malicious intent. So it's a slap suit. And he sued Kyle Seraphin, who is a former FBI agent who exposed that Kash Patel was using FBI jets, government jets that we pay for. We're paying for the jet fuel to go from, I think, Las Vegas to Pennsylvania to see Alexis Wilkins sing the Star-Spangled Banner at a pro wrestling event and have a date night with her. And he had criticized his predecessor for using FBI jets. Next thing you know, he fires the 27-year FBI veteran who oversees the fleet of jets at the FBI and makes sure that the companies, the websites where you can monitor FBI, his jet, were pushed to no longer monitor his jet. I mean, this is his response. Very authoritarian, erratic response. I've never seen an FBI director act like this. And there was this long November 2nd post by Kash Patel where he's whining about everyone attacking his girlfriend. He calls them internet anarchists and haters.
Wow.
Why doesn't he? I mean, why would he even have to take the jets if he was just living with her?
Yeah.
Put a ring on it. Put a ring on it.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
why won't they get married?
No, for real. I mean, sounds like you're pushing another Democrat hoax, Max. I mean, when I saw the lawsuit, when I saw your article, I was like, well, like she's gonna have to sue a lot of people because I see like 16-year-olds on Instagram like going live, like joking about Kash Patel's girlfriend. So, I mean, like it is unbelievable, and it's also unbelievable. Like it always. I mean. Just the lawfare and the censorship, the attempts to shut down any, criticism and just, saying, don't talk about it. This is a hoax, blah, blah, blah. I heard you talk about it on with Alex Jones earlier, which everyone should watch that interview. It's very good, but
thank you.
Yeah.
He just let me go off. Like something's happening out there.
No, it was like I was like, damn. I wonder how if Alex Jones' audience has heard, about the history of Venezuelan like regime change operations before. So I was very pleased. But Alex was making the point that it's like, man, like these like the Israel firsters, like they go out of their way to basically confirm, to just like basically play the stereotype that everyone is sort of like the anti-Semitic stereotypes and all this. It's remarkable, and it's a losing strategy. Obviously, I don't know, why Kash Patel thinks like trying to cover
kiss of death. Like
him.
It's the kiss of death. Kash Patel said in December when he was vying to be FBI director that America has to prioritize Israel, and those words have come back to hurt him.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd see the day. I want to take just like a really quick musical break. Because we've been talking about a lot of serious, weighty, and sometimes disturbing subjects, and I think we could all use a patriotic music break.
Am I supposed to be saying something? I don't see anything on my end.
Oh man, I've been watching it and laughing and enjoying it, and no one can see it because fucking nasal country, and she's kind of trying to do bars, like she's rhyming over trap.
I thought you were gonna play the national anthem. I didn't realize she wrote her own like original conservative music, which like. I don't know if you've tried listening to any of these like conservative like singers or like especially the rappers. Like there's that guy that's tight with Ben Shapiro. Like
oh yeah, Tom McDonald. It's like some tatted up white hip hop rapper who like the only people who listen to him are like 65-year-old Fox News boomers who buy pillows from Mike Lindell.
He's like, cancel culture is wrong. Like, it's just like the most like on the nose. Oh my God.
Back in the day, the music was clean. All I could hear was a steel string, and Donald Trump was president. Okay, so no, clearly we only know about Alexis Wilkins because of her great contributions to the country music tradition and because she's hailed as an icon in Nashville. It has nothing to do with the fact that she's in a relationship with a guy 20 years her senior who swore in on the Bhagavad Gita.
No, that's all part of the Democrat hoax. They're trying to undermine this strong, independent, conservative woman who's a great musician, obviously.
She's actually said that, like, don't stop referring to me as the FBI director's girlfriend. I am a great country singer and content creator.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not going to cut it. There's a reason we're talking about her. And now they're going after their own people. They're eating their own movement alive. Kash Patel, the FBI director, Trump's top cop, is trying to like take bodies within the America First podcaster world on behalf of that auto-tuned, monotonal country wannabe. Yeah. I mean, at every level you look, it's just laughable. And then you have the Epstein files on top of it all. The Trump, I mean, and this is like is this the first year of the second?
It hasn't even been a year. I mean, until next January. I mean, it hasn't even been a year. And like we have videos of, you know, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, even Trump himself, like sort of alluding to, yeah, we're gonna, you know, declassify a lot of stuff. I mean, it's absurd. Like interviews like in like October of 2024, these people saying this, it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, Kash was promising the most along with Dan Bongino.
Yeah.
Which speaks to the crisis that they're in. And they're getting roasted at TPUSA events.
Yes.
I mean, here's a really good exchange.
Mr. Trump and Ms. Trump, I'd like to ask about...
This guy's so much more real than Alexis Wilkins. Mr. Trump, I just came down from the old lumber yard and I want to talk to you about a little place called Apartheid Israel and a battle campaign against the Palestinian people using Gaza as a laboratory for the neo-colonial capitalist necro economy. Now, here we go.
Your father's relationship with Israel. He's taken over $230 million from pro-Israel groups. During the summer against Iran, even though he advised against it, Israel still attacked Iran and the U.S. still bombed on behalf of Israel. Your father's frustrations with Netanyahu have been made clear when he cursed on national TV over the situation. Israel has not been a great ally to the U.S. all the way since 1960 when they bombed the USS Liberty. Israel is a nation where Christians are constantly under attack in both Gaza and the West Bank. We talk about America first and defending Christians, but how can we do this if we align ourselves with a nation that does not do that itself?
There's Eric Trump, who's in charge of Trump crypto. They brought in $1 billion in bribes without us knowing who's doing the bribery. And he's about to have to answer this question. We never hear journalists ask anyone in the Trump family these questions, including Trump. They never ask these questions. And these are the questions that everybody wants to ask. So, and that guy was incredible. The way he delivered it so calmly and concisely. Yeah. This is what needs to be done. Like, this is what young people should be doing across America on the left and on the right. This is like the most you can do.
There's no question my father's had frustration. In fact, I think he's had frustration throughout the whole conflict with both sides.
With both sides. Okay. Well, and then the thing is, but sorry to cut in, but you know, JD Vance was confronted about this. Glenn Beck whenever these Trump world figures are confronted at these TPUSA events, they never defend Israel in an aggressive way. They're always very defensive about Trump, but they never will defend the special relationship with Israel or say Israel didn't commit ethnic cleansing. How dare you say that? And Israel's an ally. It's so clear that none of them are actually enthusiastic about Israel.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one thing I have been thinking about a lot lately is like, you know, a lot of people are talking about, okay, you know, why is the right wing sort of ascendant on the question of Israel? And, you know, I think one of the reasons is that in some ways, you know, I think the right has sort of highlighted this aspect that the left has kind of usually like veered away from, like about the nature of the U.S.-Israel relationship. Like usually, you know, the left will put forward the aircraft carrier thesis, which is like the idea that Israel is a vassal state of the United States and that they're, you know, America is making Israel do what it's doing to further the interests of American imperialism and in the region. And, you know, I think a lot of things could be said about that. Like, I think that was true maybe a few decades ago, a little more, but the dynamic has clearly shifted. And, you know, America, I will also say, has many bases in the region, like outside. I mean, it doesn't have bases in Israel. It has bases in Syria and Jordan and, you know, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. It has a huge presence in the Middle East. But, you know, I think like the conservative movement has really succeeded in pointing out something that is like very like that is plain for everyone to see. And, you know, I think the left has sort of not talked about this because they're, you know, afraid of like perpetuating anti-Semitic tropes or whatever. But I think the conservatives have pointed out what you're talking about, Max, which is like you see some of these senators or, you know, members of Congress, they get confronted. Someone comes up to them with a phone and is like, excuse me, sir, like, why do you think it's okay for Israel to be blowing up hospitals and schools? And then the dude just flies in a rage and is like, are you Hamas? Did Hamas send you? And it's like, it's such like a lunatic, like crazy response that I think anyone, even if you know nothing about Palestine, knows, okay, this person is like really not like, there's something else going on here. Like this person doesn't just like, he's not like an ardent, like ideological believer of the state of Israel. There's also this aspect of like, you're doing mental gymnastics to like, because there are some ulterior motives here. And it's, you know, obviously these people are being paid and their political careers rely on supporting Israel. So, you know, I think, I mean, it is so important to expose what I think everyone can see. And now, you know, I think the conservative movement has been doing a good job of naming it. So it has the left. But yeah, that really, I think, is like one of the big developments, I think, is people are starting to like uncover the way politics works in the United States. They're starting to see the actual mechanisms, not just in a theoretical sense, like with sort of theoretical terms, but they see, okay, these people actually, they get this amount of money from this group and these individuals, and that's what makes them respond and babble like idiots on, you know, the news or when they get confronted by journalists. So it is a really unique thing. And I think, yeah, conservatives have sort of been, you know, more forceful in that lately. Now, if I could say, you know, there is also this wing of people, and you know, I know people will point this out. You know, there's like this conversation right now about Jewish supremacy, and I think, you know, one thing the conservatives have also, you know, sort of done is like, obviously it goes without saying that Zionism, that not all Jews are Zionists, and that Zionism is not a feature of Judaism. But at the same time, like, it is kind of hard to like separate the fact that Zionism is Jewish in character, in that it's Jewish ultranationalism, you know, Jewish right-wing sentiment, which is not to say, obviously, like, there are nationalists in every country. This is not something exclusive to Jews. Like, my mom is Japanese, like, they're Japanese ultranationalists, you know, they're German ultranationalists, whatever. But, you know, one thing that I think is, I mean, Max, I think you know this, you know, for those of you that are meeting me, I grew up, my dad is Jewish. I grew up in a very Jewish town, in a sort of wealthy town. And there is this aspect of, there is this there's an upper crust in the Jewish community of people who, they might be like liberal or, whatever on other issues, but they are like diehard, genocidal fanatics on Israel. And there is a current, it's not everyone, it's not the majority, but there are people in the Jewish community like Bill Ackman, like Michael Rappaport, like these people who, for whatever reason, whether it's because they're religious and they think, they're of like a divine bloodline, or they're not religious and they still believe they're of a divine bloodline, or whatever it is. And, I think the right wing has been very forceful in like being like, okay, we're not going to be called like bigots and anti-Semites anymore, which is good. But I will add to that, there are also people on the right, like, the Lucas Gages of the world and the Nick Fuenteses, who are pushing this, like, they go, some people on the left are like, oh, America controls Israel. Then there are people on the right who are like, Israel controls America, which is also not true. And I think they are pushing it for their own their own political reasoning, which is that they want to basically be able to say, oh, well, why is this all happening in America? Why is Zionism, infiltrating U.S. politics? Well, because it is an inherent racial characteristic of Jews. This is just who Jews are. This is their like biological disposition to like, be deceptive. And this is where I actually have a problem. The people who try to essentialize and say this is all Jews and say this is like a characteristic of Jews to do this. And then the next step they take, the reason they do this is the next step they want to take is to say every race has inherent national characteristics. Everyone is just biologically predisposed by their race. And, white people are a certain way, and black people are a certain way, and Asians are a certain way. And it's just unchangeable. And, what's ironic is a lot of these, these actual like white nationalist critics of Israel on the right, they are critical of Israel for sure, but for different reasons than us, is they want like a white Zionism. They want Zionism for white people. Like they want like it's ironic because they are so racist against Indians, but they are like they want like a Hindu nationalist style caste system, but by race. And it's just it's bizarre. So I think that also needs to be said. And but I'm also not going to join this chorus of people that says every conservative who is criticizing Israel is an anti-Semite. I actually don't think that at all. And I think a lot of these people are very genuine. I think a lot of them are being moved by their faith in many cases because they're seeing something awful. And it's a natural human response to oppose something awful. And, I think it's great that, I would like to see more people sort of having conversations and sort of trying to find common ground. Anyway, I've gone on for a little while, but yeah.
Well, it's nice to have someone else talk. I'm losing my voice.
Yeah.
The ADL obviously fabricates that anti-Semitism is surging to the point where we need to enact sweeping censorship laws and monitor Mamdani and monitor students and jail people. They incorporate in their phony data any pro-Palestine chant, pro-Palestine anti-genocide march, and tabulate it as an anti-Semitic incident. At the same time, I mean, it's just a vibe I get is people online who are very politically active tend to be, but I see more anti-Jewish attitudes, open anti-Jewish attitudes you didn't see before.
Totally.
And I'm not just going to, I mean, it's not just that there's this magnetic figure on the right who's like the new Hitler, who's able to just conjure up these attitudes. Like there have always been these figures around. And their biggest problem with Jews wasn't necessarily Israel. It was that Jews were sort of a driving force for civil rights and Hollywood and the cultural destruction of America and pushing liberalism and so on. But now what they're looking at when they see Jews in public, what do they see? I mean, what they're seeing is just absolutely ghastly. And it's being seen in a way like never before, because these figures who used to feel so securely in control of Democratic and Republican administrations and Congress, at least when it came to the Middle East, are now desperate and are now coming out. They're sort of coming out of the shadows, and they can't control themselves. They're just like cartoonish figures.
Yeah.
And they don't have anyone on their own that can convincingly move people in the media. Like they're putting Josh Hammer up against Nick Fuentes or Tucker Carlson. Like Josh Hammer, he's like a Jewish, negative Jewish stereotype. All the Jews that everyone sees online embody all of the negative stereotypes, and they're not funny or particularly intelligent, which are the positive stereotypes. They're not like you're not seeing like the cool Jews like George Carlin and Lenny Bruce out there. And like, you know,
I didn't know George Carlin was Jewish. I'm a big fan.
This is what they're seeing.
Yeah. Are you pulling a clip?
God damn.
Fucking
They just made StreamYard so much worse.
Oh.
This is Morton Klein of the Zionist Organization of America, he just is completely controlled and paid for by Miriam Adelson, the Israeli warlord, who also is one of the largest, if not the largest donor to Trump. How is this not going to fuel anti-Jewish attitudes watching this?
Because of open borders, the number of Muslims in New York has gone from 10 years ago, 100,000 Muslims, to 1 million. Yes, the demographics have changed. The people of America has not changed so much, but the demographics have changed. That's what happened. And also large numbers of conservative right-of-center people have left New York, moved to Florida and elsewhere. You had a totally different demographic. That explains one of the reasons this vicious, communist, racist, Jew-hating, Israel-bashing monster was elected. And what's frightening, though, there's a huge danger that Jew hatred and Israel bashing has become a badge of conscience and enlightenment. There's been a moralization and legitimization and mainstreaming of bigotry against Jews. Bigotry is disguised as principle. Hatred is baptized as virtue. Hostility to Israel now indicates decency and high morals. We at the ZOA will fight these dangerous and monstrous lies with all of our hearts and souls.
No, you won't. You're like responsible for them. Like you're the reason they're happening.
Yeah.
I mean, if they wanted to make anti-Semitism go away, then Morton Klein would just disappear. Batya Ungar Sargon would shut the hell up, and Josh Hammer would go work DoorDash, but he probably has never worked a real job. I mean, the less you see of these people, the more it's going to go away. But what are they going to do? They're going to do like manufactured anti-Semitic incidents. I don't know if it really was an Orthodox Jew spray painting a swastika on a synagogue in Gravesend, but he was like wearing a top hat, a fedora.
Yeah.
And like the Zionist line was, no, that was a cowboy hat. He's like the midnight cowboy. That was not a fedora. It was a cowboy hat.
in Brooklyn.
He drove in from Montana.
It's made a quick stop in Brooklyn. A lot of cowboys in Brooklyn these days. But it's funny. I sent Max an ADL report from this year about how there are 2 billion anti-Semites in the world now, apparently, according to the ADL. And Max was just like, this is what they want. And like, it's such an important point that just has to be reiterated over and over, like at every single point in the Zionist movement's history, which, this is an educated audience, but we all know this goes before 1948. It goes to the 19th century. Anti-Semitism has always been like the fuel. I mean, it's been like Zionists sort of crave and just desire anti-Semitism, especially before the creation of the state of Israel, because it created the justification for, hey, this is why we need this state. And, the management of savagery has been the book of the night. I don't know if, I think people, I don't know if you know the general thesis that, the U.S. supported Wahhabism in its sort of crusade against communism to, overthrow the Soviet Union and to beat them in Afghanistan. They sponsored and helped spread this Wahhabist ideology to Muslim radicals, and basically created what would become the basis of the Taliban and Al Qaeda. And in creating these radicals, of course, created all these problems, in Iraq. Jelani, you talked about Jelani, like he was a creation of this whole lineage, and then, starting these wars, which would end up sending streams of immigrants to Europe and America, which would then give rise to this anti-immigrant nativist right and give rise to Donald Trump. And I was thinking, as you were talking about this, I was like, maybe you need a management of savagery too, about how in the last 2 years, Israel has been so open in just they're flaunting their power. Netanyahu like calling on Joe Biden to like crush the Palestine encampments, or like sitting down with
calling
US
for a Kent State solution, calling for the National Guard. You're right. They're just flaunting their power, and it's too out in the open. Everyone can see how it works. Yeah. Huge correction, by the way, I have to make. I don't know why I said George Carlin was Jewish. He's Irish Catholic, but I consider him like in line with the great Hebrew prophets. So maybe that's why I said it. Lenny Bruce, he was. So just wanted to issue that correction real quick. But you get the point. And, just to illustrate the point that we're making, that there's this sort of symbiotic relationship between anti-Jewish elements and Zionist elements working almost hand in hand, not against anti-Semitism. I mean, this is the Jerusalem Post, which is sort of the English language newspaper based in Israel for all of the American and Anglo Jews who have moved to Israel, made Aliyah. It's a very right-wing publication. Zoran Mamdani, being a socialist, a Muslim, and anti-Israel, is worrying the Jewish community of New York. Still, it might actually do them a big favor, give them the push they need to come to Israel. So they're openly saying it. I mean, this is really what Zionism's about. Yeah. This is like the perfect distillation of Zionism into one tweet. They don't want anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish hatred to end. They want it to flourish in the United States in order to justify Israel as a sanctuary for the world's Jews, because Israel doesn't really have much other justification except as an imperial attack dog, and that one is wearing off as well. So I think that kind of makes that point nicely. And it's disturbing. It's disturbing because there's nothing I can say. It's like, I'm not going to go and argue with white nationalist critics of Israel because they're white nationalists who don't like Jews and I happen to be Jewish. Like, what good does that serve? It's not going to convince anyone. There's nothing I can do. As soon as Israel stops asserting itself in the United States as the eighth front of its global war, I mean, Netanyahu's openly announced that the U.S. is its eighth front. We're going to start to see all those attitudes kind of fade away.
Yeah,
this is the answer to anti-Semitism. Yeah. Is dismantling Zionism.
Yeah. Yep.
Just one quick Epstein email before we go. I got to jump off. I'm like, this is like I feel like I'm like in a Cory Booker filibuster, and I should have like worn a diaper in here. Like, we need to recognize that we have to be audacious about the better future of tomorrow. How many bromides can I proclaim without saying anything substantial to seem like a hero to boomer white liberals? There are some emails in the Epstein new tranche that are really funny. The Larry Summers, who is like the perfect like physical manifestation of the hideousness of his soul, is asking Jeffrey Epstein for dating advice and hitting on like students that he's trying to date. There's the one like, did he blow Bubba yet, from Mark Epstein to Jeffrey Epstein. And then there's tons of Noam Chomsky emails, because there's one where Epstein said, Chomsky just called me and he's in prison. He's with Lula in prison, and he just called me from there.
Lula da Silva?
Yeah, because I think Chomsky's new wife was friendly with Lula.
And Noam Chomsky was in prison?
No, he just went to visit Lula in prison and called Jeffrey Epstein while he was there so Epstein could talk to Lula.
Wow. What do you... Wow. I mean, I know Noam Chomsky, I mean, he's been denying it, that there was any substantial relationship. I almost don't want to speculate. Yeah, I mean...
Oh, yeah. Chomsky issued this long letter, explaining why, why he knew Epstein, and basically telling people that it was a totally legitimate relationship. Although Chomsky was helping manage Epstein was helping manage Chomsky's money. It ends in a really foolish way for someone who is a master of words and language. Chomsky, I mean, he was one of the premier scholars of linguistics, and it ends, he quickly became a highly valued friend and regular source of intellectual exchange and stimulation. Why did you have to put "and stimulation"? It could have been intellectual stimulation and exchange, but stimulation is just hanging there on its own as the very last word.
That is incredible. I haven't been, my girlfriend told me that she codes, and she told me she developed some code to basically go through the Epstein emails, but I haven't had a chance to use the tool yet. But what has been the most surprising thing for you
out of the Epstein emails?
Yeah.
I guess the Trump email, but we already knew about Chomsky. When I was opening for Jimmy Dore, I think in my first set, I had a whole bit about Chomsky and Epstein. And I said, it gives new meaning to the manufacturing of consent. That was kind of the obvious punchline.
Yeah.
But, Donald Trump, I think, there's the Tom Barak email where Epstein said, "Send me a picture of you and child. I want to smile." He was probably referring to his grandchild. I don't think he was send me a naked picture of a boy or something, but who knows? And everyone is issuing the most severe interpretation possible because these people are the scum of the earth.
I was watching MSNBC, which I think becomes MS Now, tonight or tomorrow. but they've been talking about Epstein obviously nonstop, and it's so funny how they try to walk this very careful line where they're yes, now this implicates Trump, and we care about this very deeply, but this is also a conspiracy theory, and we spent the last 5 years we don't want to get into the Epstein conspiracy theory stuff, but we want to talk about Epstein tonight because it's critical to our to politics. It's what the hell?
Yeah, I mean,
it's unbelievable.
CNN is sort of doing the same dance where we want to frame it in a partisan way, but Epstein, it's an indictment of decadent elite that spans across the corporate duopoly, and it should inspire people to be more politically independent. I mean, I think that's one of the takeaways. If the Democrats were in power, the Republicans would be pushing it, and Kash Patel would be like one of the key legal activists, and Dan Bongino would be banging his table on one of the astroturfed corporate networks where he had his podcast and demanding that they release the files, and Kamala Harris or whoever would be in office, Malia Obama, wouldn't be releasing the files because they would implicate Bill Clinton, who's still alive.
Yeah. And, it really does it is remarkable how so many of the things that we talked about, we've been talking about for years and years, now all of a sudden, come into vogue. And obviously people have been talking about Epstein for a long time, we're called crazy, et cetera, et cetera. People have been talking about, sex trafficking and these sort of blackmail rings. I mean, this goes beyond Epstein. There were problems. There were instances like this under the Reagan administration. And, you talked about, you probably know a little more about this, but, Bugsy Siegel and Mayor Lansky and all the organized crime. I mean, that has played such a huge role in politics. And I think a lot of people underestimate like the role that essentially like politics, it's hard to separate from organized crime. So, I really do think Epstein is like, it's kind of intrinsic, like very important part of understanding politics. I mean, obviously the people that like chalk everything up to, these sort of nefarious circles, but it does tell you something very important about the way politics is conducted. You could say the same thing about, obviously it's not to the same degree, but like the way New York City politics, has already been sort of, churning out, and the way it will likely go, just given what we know about the real estate industry and, the power of the NYPD and all these things. Point being that, politics is conducted largely behind closed doors, over dinner, over drinks, in mansions, and not what we see on TV.
Great point. Last issue before we go, Chomsky versus Michael Parenti. I mean, this kind of this would kind of settle it.
Yeah, this is kind of I think this is the decisive factor. I think this really settles that matter for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people.
Well, we got to have Christian Parenti on at some point soon. Yeah, if you're watching, sorry I haven't responded. I've got some texts from him just sitting there, overwhelmed these days. Christian was a real star of our Grayzone day at Icarus Fest, and we got to get him back on here. But yeah, and Michael Parenti, he's still alive and he's still with us. And if you really want to understand the manufacturing of consent, read Michael Parenti's book, Inventing Reality. If you really want to understand how destructive humanitarian interventions by the US and NATO have been, read Michael Parenti on Yugoslavia, Killing a Nation. There are so many incredible contributions, and he didn't get his due like Chomsky.
No.
I should also say Chomsky was very influential to me as I was sort of deprogramming myself from partisanship and liberalism, because it was easier to get your hands on Chomsky books, and they were going around sort of like Samizdat when I was living in LA at the time. So I don't want to, I'm not condemning Noam Chomsky, but it's like all those rockers from I keep making people call them boomer references, but like, who the hell wants to listen to music today?
Yeah.
They all died when they were 28, like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix. Bob Dylan got in a motorcycle accident in 1966, I think, and I don't know if he ever fully recovered from that. But imagine if like they had lived through the disco era, like what would have happened to them? Like Purple Haze with like slap bass, Purple Haze, like trying to stay relevant. And Chomsky just lived forever and like was a public intellectual until fairly recently. Yeah. He's still alive too. So I don't know. I hope like if I drift into libtardation at some point that like someone puts me out of my misery. Like I hope Anya just like snuffs me out.
Yeah.
By the way, I sort of met Anya through Morton Klein, who we saw before.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I debated Morton Klein on Breaking the Set, and Anya was the booker. So that was the first time I ever came into contact with her. And like that video is hilarious because I was destroying him in the debate, and I could only hear it. And I just heard him like being like, and I was talking about like what was happening in Gaza at the time. It was 2014. I'm like, children are being killed more, and that is not funny. God. And then he just starts laying into me, and he said, I have Tourette's syndrome. Like, I didn't know. Why didn't like someone tell me? Why didn't Anya tell me? But nobody knew. So that was like his big moment of the debate. Christ, yeah. But I was never able to debate him again.
Wow.
And maybe we can debate on Piers Morgan or something.
Yeah. Yeah. That clip of him, really bad for Jews everywhere.
Bad for the Jews.
Really bad.
Shonda, just a nonstop Shonda machine. All right. Well, Kay, thanks for joining us. That was fun. This is our newest member of the Grayzone, Kay Pritzker, no relation to Penny or JB Pritzker, right?
No, none whatsoever. Yeah. Please tell your friends if they ask.
All right. All right. Thanks everybody for being a part of our stream and for supporting the Grayzone. As I said, I think last week we're suspended or blocked by PayPal. So if you want to support us, we have a new way to do so on our Substack site or on our thegrayzone.com regular site. You can just go to the support tab if you want to support the cause. We'll be launching a campaign against PayPal soon, and also launching a campaign to support Kay, who has no filmmaking equipment, because we want to actually get out in the field and do some real things. Thanks for subscribing as well and liking this stream, and we'll see you all next week. Peace.